Now, it could be argued that not very much happened in the local elections. Not very many councils changed hands and none of the main parties made significant strides. So it was a local election where everyone is claiming victory, but no one seems to have won. The Labour Party failed to make the breakthrough it was hoping for. The party won 2 councils but failed to win any of the authorities it targeted in London. Nevertheless, the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, was predictably upbeat.
Obviously, I'm disappointed at any places where we lost a bit of ground. But if you look at the overall picture, Labour gained a lot of seats across the whole country. We gained a lot of votes in places we'd never had those votes before. And we had a very, very effective campaign all over the country. I'm very proud of the work that the Labour Party has done in these elections. I'm very proud of those councillors that got elected.
The Conservatives made gains and, as you'd expect, the Prime Minister was also sounding positive, perhaps even a little relieved.
We've taken councils like Basildon and Peterborough. We've shown what hard work and what Conservative councils can do in delivering for people. But we're not going to be complacent. We won't take anything for granted. And we're going to build on this success for the future.
Among the gains for the Conservatives was in Walsall in the West Midlands. The Tories took one of the parliamentary seats from Labour at the last election, and Labour had planned to take control of the council in this election. It was not to be. On the contrary, this was one of the councils where the Conservatives gained seats from Labour, as our correspondent Paul Moss has been finding out.
In the 200 or so metre stretch which makes up Bloxwich High Street, I counted 5 charity shops, 3 money lenders and a discount store offering shoes for £3 a pair. This is one of the poorest parts of Walsall, a town which itself has some of the worst indicators of deprivation in the country. And this ward last night kicked out its sitting Labour councillor, replacing her with a Conservative. People in the High Street I spoke to offered remarkably consistent views.
I've always been a Labour supporter, but never again since I've had that Corbyn in. He's a Prat, that's what he is. He's a communist, I'm
not that keen on Jeremy Corbyn, just in general as a person and some of the things that he stood against.
Is that what stopped you voting Labour this time, the leader?
Yes.
Now there's a lady rushing home with her shopping. I managed to stop. Who did you vote for in the local election?
Labour.
You did vote for Labour?
Yes, I did.
Why do you think they didn't do so well here?
I've heard people say they're not happy with Jeremy Corbyn, or they don't like him, or don't like some of the comments he's made. He doesn't seem to have much oomph.
Walsall Town Hall this afternoon had a rather ghostly feel. The day after, the night before, saw just a few councillors in the building. Those Labour ones I spotted not even bothering to hide looks of shock and dismay. Predictably more upbeat was the leader of the Conservative group. With 5 seats gained, 2 of them from Labour, Mike Bird had something to show me.
I've been very fortunate to receive a tweet from the Prime Minister today.
Let's see it.
There we are. It says, huge congratulations to Councillor Mike Bird and the Walsall Conservative team for a great result and becoming the largest party on the council.
You, despite being a Conservative councillor, Conservative leader, have been quite outspokenly critical of Theresa May and her government in the past. You've said they're out of touch with local people. You've criticised the austerity measures they introduced for going too far. Doesn't seem to have done you any harm, though, does it? You've won.
Well, that's true. We fought this on local issues, and local issues have won us through. Litter in the streets, fly tipping. I just hope that people in Westminster will learn from what we do locally.
I suppose I should ask you if you've got any message for them. How can they, the Conservatives, do nationally what you've managed to do here in Walsall?
I think it is time for the Conservative Party nationally to look at the austerity measures and see whether there is any possibility we can row back. It could probably tend to slow down a bit, but that's a matter for the Chancellor on finances.
Theresa May was in the West Midlands today. She visited Dudley, which also showed a swing to the Conservatives. But this wasn't merely a victory lap. The West Midlands region is full of swing seats, a dependably bloody general election battlefield. And the Prime Minister clearly had an eye on that next contest when she said her party would build on its success here. But she can't bank on that, according to Peter Madeley, political editor of the local Express and Star newspaper. He thinks the Conservative gains here stemmed from the big national issue of the day, one that certainly can't be relied on to deliver when Britain next goes to the polls.
Walsall North in particular was a massive Brexit area, and I think that that's played a bigger role in this local election. So I'm not sure we can say that by the time the next general election comes around that this is going to have a massive impact. You look at the results in Walsall and Dudley where the Conservatives have done well, and you compare them to the results in Samwell and Wolverhampton where they've done appallingly badly. There's an awful lot to play for. I think austerity is something that will come into it more in the general election.
To see the effects of the council cuts in Walsall, I've come to Plec in the west of the town where the local library was shut down last year. It's all boarded up. It looks like it's not being used for anything at the moment. And that is a particular source of sadness for the man here with me, Andy Summers, because Andy is a retired English teacher. He's also a local Labour Party activist. He campaigned for Jeremy Corbyn to be the Labour Party leader. And Andy, you've told me that you support the aims of Momentum, Jeremy Corbyn's grassroots organisation. How is it that after quite a few years of Conservative-imposed cuts, after ministerial resignations, after things like the Windrush affair, Labour's still not making major gains, and in fact you've lost here in Walsall?
It's a huge frustration because the content and the meaning behind the Momentum movement, why I supported Jeremy, is because I think those are the right answers to the problems that affect these areas. And tragically, the public still don't understand that library standing there empty, closed, in an area that desperately needs it, actually is a testimony. It is closed because the Tories cut the funding, and the Labour Party has got to work harder to get that message over.
Some people, are going to say it's far simpler than that. The problem is Jeremy Corbyn. He is the reason why you're still not getting any traction and you're losing votes.
I don't agree that he is the reason. I think what is the reason is the way in which issues about Corbyn are being exploited.
Both the Labour and Conservative groups will now try to win over independent councillors in Walsall in the hope of forming an administration. The Conservatives, having pulled ahead of Labour, reckon it's they who now have the momentum. But you can expect plenty of wheeling, dealing, horse trading and politicking here in the days and weeks ahead.
Paul Moss reporting from Walsall. We're joined now from Westminster by our political correspondent and friend of the World Tonight, Chris Mason. Chris, Paul's report from the West Midlands suggesting that Labour has not been able to capitalise on the sorts of challenges that the government has been facing, has sort of lost momentum. Is there a worry, though, that we're trying to transpose what happened in the local elections into a sort of theoretical general election if one was to be held tomorrow?
There is always the danger, Razia, on nights like this to extrapolate. Why? Because the temptation to extrapolate is huge, but the danger in extrapolation is bigger still. Because if you're listening to us tonight in Scotland, in Wales, in big chunks of England, anywhere in Northern Ireland outside the one area where there was a parliamentary by-election last night, then you didn't get an invite to the polling station yesterday. And of course, in those areas of England where there were elections, a whole cornucopia of reasons motivating people to vote in a particular direction that might be different from how they might be inclined to vote when selecting a national government. And as if to prove that point, we only have to look back 1 year. We don't have to go back into the deep archive of politics to mine out an example to prove this. Just look at the local election results of a year ago, about 6 weeks before the general election. Labour did pretty badly. 6 or 7 weeks later at the general election did so much better than many expected. But what is real about days like this is the extent to which they set the mood at Westminster, because they're real votes in real ballot boxes. They're not opinion polls that can be easily dismissed as straws in the wind that are subject to a measure of inaccuracy and might be completely wrong. They are real votes, they are real ballot boxes, and so they do have a real effect in setting the mood. And there's a conversation now going on within the Labour Party again about whether, frankly, they should be doing better than they did. And collectively within the Conservative Party, who've spent much of the last year fretting that the most likely next Prime Minister was a Mr. J. Corbyn, are wiping a little bit of sweat off their brow and expressing an element of relief. Not celebratory, but just relieved that they did better than they feared.
And I suppose just briefly, Chris, we shouldn't forget that the country is still polarised, not least on the issue of Brexit.
Absolutely. There are 3 letters that are used by people like me on days like this. No overall control, NOC. It's a nerdy lexicon describing councils that don't have a party that has won outright. But it's worth exploring an observation that Philip Collins of The Times made this morning, that those letters, that phrase speaks to the politics of now. The 2 big Westminster parties remaining big and hulking and broad churches, but neither able to punch through decisively with the divisions of geography, towns, Walsall versus cities, London, Birmingham, for instance. Brexit, huge dividing line. UKIP disappearing pretty much. The Liberal Democrats capitalising on anxiety around Brexit. And a projected national share, this is where I go back to the danger of extrapolation, but a projected national share on the basis of today's results suggesting a well and truly hung Parliament if you were to transpose today's results into the House of Commons.
We will leave it there. Chris Mason joining us live from Westminster. Thank you.